The monthly meeting of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, which will be a hybrid meeting, conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, on Wednesday, the 9th of October at 4 p.m. And I'll hand over to Karen to do the members' attendance and apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Derek Hussey. Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Alderman Julie Middleton.
Yes, online.
Thank you.
She's online, yeah.
Councillor John Boyle. It's online.
Online,
Councillor,
yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Caitlin Deany. On her way. Okay. Councillor Alex Duffy. It's not there. Okay. Councillor Sean Fleming.
And Sean.
Councillor Brian Hart.
Shut.
Councillor Emma McGinley. Councillor Room Q. Councillor Pat Murphy. Councillor Declan Norris.
Apologies.
Okay. Councillor Martin Riley. Councillor Brian Tierney.
Here.
Thank you.
Right, members, the broadcasting statement. I'd like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with the protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to be informed and to the use and storage of these images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derristheban.com. Item 4, members, is declaration of members' interest. Does anyone wish to raise a declaration at this stage, or do you want to leave it until items are brought up? I don't see any. Councillor McGinley, Emma?
Just on the item, it's in confidential around the painting lots. I would be a board member on a number of the community centres that are listed in that.
Thank you, Emma. No other declarations of interest. We can bring them up, as I say, when the item arises. We'll move then to item 5, which is the deputation from DFI, the Roads Western Division. And we have Daniel Healy and Sam Young and is it Brian?
Yep.
Brian, sorry. Yeah, that's all right. So we'll just hand over to DFI to make the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Delighted to be able to present DFI Roads Annual Report to Council and highlight some of the challenges and successes we've had over the past year. This is the third time I've had the opportunity to address this meeting, and many of the issues that I touch upon this afternoon will be familiar to those of you who have heard my previous presentations. I always think it's useful to emphasise the main challenge we face in DFI when seeking to improve or even maintain our roads infrastructure, and that's funding. While there are a number of other contributory factors that affect the condition of our road assets, the ability to effectively manage our infrastructure is most impacted by the funding we receive. This year's capital funding for structural maintenance was around £89 million. That covers all of Northern Ireland. The capital funding allows the department to complete larger scale resurfacing schemes to significantly prolong the lifespan of our roads. This level of investment is welcome and helps towards the £190 million per year maintenance requirement adjusted for inflation recommended by the 2018 Barton Report and the 2019 Northern Ireland Audit Office Report on road maintenance. While this level of funding is perhaps not what the department would hope for, the return of the Assembly means that there are opportunities to bid for additional monies within the periodic monitoring rounds this year. This is a welcome change from the last year, and I'd like to assure councillors that we in Western Division, much as we have done in previous years, will be bidding strongly for as much in-year funding as possible, which will be translated directly into improvements in our roads infrastructure. I can confirm that the department will continue to implement our limited service policy across our maintenance activities, which means only the most severe defects are being repaired. I know I've highlighted the effect that this has on the quality of our roads and the future maintenance burden that this may leave the department, but I would stress my teams are doing all they can to ensure that the network is managed in the most efficient and effective manner. The report itself details an extensive list of maintenance, network development, active travel, street lighting, structures, schemes, along with network planning statistics completed in 23-24 and programmed for the current year. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I'll give a brief overview of the scale of the work completed by the division. With regards to major projects, you'll be aware that of the good news issued by the Infrastructure Minister last week with the proposed construction of the Stage 2 of the A5 Western Transport Corridor, which will have significant traffic benefits for the surrounding areas. The announcement means that this will potentially allow construction work to commence in 2025. The Department and Council are also working together to develop the growth deal infrastructure projects at the Riverfront and Strabane Town Centre. From a maintenance point of view, we resurfaced 31 kilometres of roads last year, along with 92 lane kilometres of surface dressing and 9 kilometres of footways. We also completed 161 drainage schemes and cleared out around 39,000 gullies out of the 48,000, which equates to about 82% of gullies cleared. There were also approximately 7,700 kilometres of verges cut and over 12,900 priority defects recorded, with over 91% of those repaired within the required timeframes. In addition, there were 69 winter service call-outs, salting over 400 kilometres of our roads on the gritting schedule. And in addition, there were over 4,000 notifications by other service providers to excavate within the highway that had to be processed by my teams. From a network development point of view, and that's the section that deals with traffic management, road safety improvements and street lighting, we completed over £300,000 of safety measure schemes, including the Ballinaguard Road footway extension, 4 traffic calming schemes, and the introduction of a number of speed restrictions, warning signs, parking restrictions, and other traffic management measures. From an active travel point of view, we completed 2 schemes with a cost valued over £600,000, including the Carrickeel shared footways at the Carrickeel Road and Temple Road in Strathfoyle. There was also over £3.9 million invested in street lighting in the district. £151,000 was invested in the upkeep of our structures, with 19 schemes varying from parapet repairs to masonry arch repairs, and over £182,000 invested in the upkeep and maintenance of our vehicle restraint systems within the district. From a network planning point of view, the department consulted locally on over 1,000 planning consultations and adopted 22 additional private streets in the last year. From a local development plan point of view, after completion of the independent examination of the draft plan strategy by the Council, the Commissioner has examined all the evidence presented, and her report was forwarded in May 2024 to the Department for consideration. This remains with headquarters to process. In the current year, many of the schemes that are in the report have already been completed, but I'll highlight some of the main statistics. This year we completed, or are in the process of completing, 37 kilometres of roads resurfacing, over 140 lane kilometres of surface dressing of roads, and over 2.5 kilometres of footway resurfacing. We're also continuing to respond in a responsive manner for drainage improvement projects, and that includes a single set of road gully cleansing activities in line with our limited service policy, and 2 grass cuts over the course of the season. Normal winter service is also planned for this year. Our network, our local transport and safety measures budget is valued at around £350,000 this year, and that includes 9 schemes, including provision of pedestrian crossings, design of sightline improvements and carriageway realignments, with the most significant being the development of a junction upgrade at Dales Corner. I take this opportunity to highlight that the improvement at Dales Corner will be delivered next year, and it will involve a certain amount of traffic congestion, but will be mitigated as much as possible. We also have 3 traffic calming schemes planned and numerous changes to speed limits, waiting restrictions and weight restrictions. Our active travels division is also delivering over £850,000 worth of active travel schemes, including 4 footway cycleway schemes, including the Foreglen Road at Clawdy, which is currently on site. There's also 18 street lighting projects at the cost of £300,000 due this year, and along with over £100,000 worth of investment in our structures and £85,000 in our vehicle restraint systems. I'm not going to go into any more detail at the moment, and that completes my brief rundown, and I appreciate that it was a whistle-top tour, so I'll be happy to expand on any of the information I've just quickly mentioned. What I would like to do is thank members for the correspondence to the department over the past year. I appreciate that all requests to the department come from a wish to improve the lives of local people in their communities, even if it's just to repair a pothole outside their house. My team and I share that aspiration. However, the service we provide is dictated by the resources available, and the sad truth is that infrastructure, along with many other public services, are operating in a challenging funding environment. That said, I will continue to make the strongest case possible for additional funding to be allocated to Western Division and ensure that we are in a position to put that funding to work on our roads should it come through increased annual funding or through in-year allocations. Thank you. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your report. Does anyone wish to raise Councillor Riley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officials from DFI Roads for coming here this afternoon to hear from us. I always find it very useful to have the presentation presented to us in advance for us to look through and to ask questions, and the sheet that is given to us to log specific local queries is always appreciated as well. So thank you for that. Through you, Chair, a couple of points I'd like to make just in relation to the report, jumping I suppose towards the end of the report to start with in terms of page 48, it does touch on the phase 2 Juding Caw to Drumahoe, and people in this chamber, and indeed people who were elected to this chamber but are no longer in the chamber, have often raised the issue about Caw roundabout and the fact that there is a significant number of accidents that occur at that location in our council area. Indeed, it's through another council function, the Police and Community Safety Partnership, that we ascertained statistics a couple of years ago, which demonstrated that that roundabout is the worst accident affected roundabout across Northern Ireland, and that's at 2 different junctions at the same roundabout. So for a number of years, the department have been given the statistics indicating that this is a huge safety concern for people, not just who live in the waterside, but for many people across the city and district and wider northwest will use that roundabout regularly and be affected by delays when accidents happen. And often the accident happens, but it isn't reported because the cars involved or the vehicles involved deal with themselves and move on. So it is. I'm conscious that at the start of the presentation, the official indicated that there was huge budgetary pressure on the department, which we can all see in terms of the report before us. But with the development of the lands adjacent to the Caw roundabout, we're in the situation where we have a developer who's building much needed social housing for our council area. And that leads me to the query in relation to how many people in our council area are on a housing waiting list awaiting an allocation of a home, and those houses are not yet able to be built because of the mitigating issues that need to be dealt with at Caw roundabout in terms of the traffic and the congestion in that area. So if we have a department who are indicating to us today that they are struggling financially, and we have a developer who's indicating that he is prepared to make the full contribution for the works at that roundabout to make it safe, can I ask DFA at what stage they are in consideration of that paperwork that has been submitted to them, and to urge them to give it every consideration to be dealt with promptly, because the sooner we can get the safety works at that roundabout completed, it will be beneficial to every road user in the northwest, but also it will help alleviate the housing waiting list, of which every single councillor in this chamber will have people on their phones and in their messages looking for updates on social housing. So, Chair, that's my first comment in relation to the report before us this afternoon. There are other issues, Chair, which I'm happy to raise as well. I know, and I appreciate there was an email that Daniel from DFI Roads had sent back to the committee section before today's meeting. We can see in the report that there are a number of disabled parking bays that are planned to be laid out across the council area in the financial year ahead. I think it starts on page 20 of the pack, and this is an issue that has come up in this chamber in the past as well. We know from the budgetary position and the response that DFI have given to the correspondence and that there are issues in relation to the costings of relining existing bays. And I can see in the email reply that members received that function is being targeted towards safety locations of lining junctions, etc., that need to have their lines restored to improve road safety. But that leaves people in a lengthy waiting list to get an existing parking bay repainted. If we are looking at a report this afternoon that is indicating there are a number of bays to be provided across the council area, can I ask at what stage and how do the department determine that they will be able to paint new lines for new bays that are on the sheet here to be approved, but they're not able to continue to paint lines that already have been approved for bays that people already have had use of, but no longer are able to because the surface outside their home has been resurfaced and the paint is worn off. Chair, there are a couple of questions that we have on the wider issue in relation to the A5. It is obviously positive to see that in our council area the A5 has been given the go ahead for the Strabane to south of Oma. We know that that's not all of the scheme, and there are pieces of the scheme that are yet to be approved. We welcome the correspondence that the Minister has given in the Assembly in relation to fulfilling all of the A5 project from the Strabane to New Buildings part. So any update, we know the Minister did speak recently in the Assembly, but any further update that officers are able to give in terms of the time frame and the delivery of that aspect to connect this city and the wider New Buildings area to the proposed development starting at outside Strabane would be appreciated. And Chair, I'll draw my remarks to a close on that point, but it is great to see that significant development which will benefit all of the Northwest, but let's work to ensure that the aspects of the city, be it at from New Buildings through to Strabane and then from the Foyle Bridge at Caw out to where the A6 joins at Drumahoe, can be also progressed so that we're left with a road network that is fully connected to our city and region. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rooney. Are you content? You've got a note of those points raised, or do you want to address
them?
Yeah, that's grand.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the works at Caw Roundabout, as you know, planning officials have been working with the developer up at H30 to try and agree a mechanism for the department to deliver Caw Roundabout. During discussions over the course of the last year, those proposals by the developer have moved along a little to them providing the upgrade to Caw Roundabout in accordance with their planning conditions. However, following a reassessment of their traffic assessment and the developments within the area, they've resubmitted proposals to change the planning conditions with regards to Caw Roundabout and H30. And that's probably one of the reasons that obviously they're looking for the department to respond as quickly as possible. The most recent report was issued to the department on the 20th of September, just a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have a response back to the developer with regards to those proposals by the end of this week. So we're working with the developer as well as we can to move that project along as quickly as possible, because we're very aware of the junction at Caw being at capacity, and also with the number of accidents which have been highlighted by both the PSNI and local representatives. So we're very keen to move that along, and we're allocating resources as well as we can to move it along as rapidly as possible. Our priority, of course, is to ensure that any proposals that are brought forward align with our transport plans, but also have positive effects with regards to traffic progression and safety, not just at Caw, but in the surrounding area as well. And that's where our focus lies. I hope that sort of moves things along. Certainly, if there are any further representations from the developer, we'll give it due priority that we're looking to move it along. With regards to the disabled parking bays, As you mentioned, a lot of our reallocation or maintenance of white lines is focused on safety related areas. In other words, junctions, stop signs, hazard markings, those sorts of things. New parking bays and new white lines are a legislative requirement for the department once they have been passed. So obviously our focus will be on providing those white lines on any new disabled parking bays. However, if there are other parking bays that require additional white lining, and if it's causing a significant amount of distress, obviously if we have the resources, we will move on to those as a priority. And if I could ask that any locations that are causing particular concern to councillors are passed to my colleagues in the local section office, where resources allow, we'll look to address those if possible. With regards to the A5, you'll have noticed there, or you'll have recorded the Minister's comments. The department remain completely committed to delivering the A5 as a whole, and we're committed to examining the A5 between new buildings and Strabane on its current alignment and looking to install mitigation measures that address the comments of the PAC report. And we're liaising with both local stakeholders and stakeholders in Donegal and Lifford areas to ensure that the proposals we bring forward have a holistic view of mitigating those measures and fulfilling the PAC requirements. At this stage, that work is ongoing, and unfortunately I don't have an update on when that work will be complete. Okay.
Thank you very much, Daniel. In regards to members, I have a number of speakers, so I'm going to take two at a time here as it stands. And you do all have, or you should have all received via email a request and inquiry form in regards to individual elements there which you can contact DFI in regards to. So just be mindful of that. But we have a number of speakers, and if we can keep our comments to a point, members, I'll bring in Councillor McGinley and then Councillor or Alderman Middleton after that. So Emma.
Mega Chair, and thank you, Brian, Daniel and Sam, for coming to present to the committee today. Specifically, I want to say a thank you to Sam, who's been working on the Glenowen Task Force and has been fantastic in terms of working as a collective along with us to try and improve that area. So I just think it's important that for enough time we sort of point out where things fall down. I think it's important to point out when things are going well too. So thank you for your work on that, Sam. Thanks for the report. There's a lot of work that's gone on it, and on behalf of the team in Sinn Féin, we are glad to see the amount of work despite the restraints in terms of funding. I know that from our perspective, when we contact the department about any issues, we do get responses. We are aware of the difficulties that exist. There's one specific query that I have in relation to the report, and it's in relation to it's on page 20, the Lekey Road to no waiting at any time legislation. In your experience, how long would that normally take to come into fruition? Because the request was lodged by Councillor Aisling Hutton back in January of this year. We're now in October. I drove past that way today and there was cars parked on the dual carriageway, but there's no signage or anything at this stage that indicates that they can't park there, although it should be common sense, but it's not. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how long would you expect that we would be waiting for that to be actioned? But thank you very much for the work that you have put in as a department. We are grateful for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Alderman Middleton, Julie.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you on behalf of the DUP to Daniel, Sam and Brian for being here today, but also for bringing a detailed and honest report. It's really good that you're transparent with us and that you are outlining different issues. In the interest of everybody's time, I'm not going to bring up many of the pertinent issues within the Fáthán. I'll send the form through separately. As elected representatives, I think it's safe to say that we're all acutely aware and indeed indebted to the hard work that our local division is doing in terms of keeping us all safe and maintaining areas as best as possible. There is, of course, much work to be done, but this doesn't take away from our acknowledgement of the tremendous work that you have undertaken and that you will undertake, as well as your ongoing programme of works for the future. despite budgetary constraints and regional imbalance. And I have to say, what some may argue, a vast difference in rural and urban services, we know that your team is both professional and fair. Aside from district priorities, I would ask that you continue to keep the rural ward of the Faughan and our neighbouring rural areas on your radar. With limited public transport and often smaller roads, it's vitally important that our roads, pathways and our street lighting networks are proactively maintained as much as possible. So just to finish up, I just want to say thank you again for giving up your time to be here, to positively engage with us as a council, and also just for the positive interaction we have when we do contact you. That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton. Do you wish to pass comment on the last two speakers?
Thank you. Just with regards to the processing of legislation, you're right, it does take quite some time. There's a very specific process that we need to go through to ensure that the legislation meets the requirements of the locals and then is processed with regards to enacting that legislation. I would admit that perhaps the process can be moved along a little quicker. That process includes a public consultation, and if there are any objections, then we have to try and overcome those objections, and that can often take a significant amount of time. But then once it passes from us to headquarters to process the legislation, there's also a significant backlog of legislation across all divisions that need to be addressed by the limited resources they have in headquarters. I would say, from my estimate and my experience over the last couple of years, the legislation, once it has gone through the consultation process, takes between 4 to 8 months to be processed by headquarters to ensure that all the boxes are ticked, essentially, and then they bundle up a lot of similar restrictions and similar legislation to publish at the same time. So there's that issue of making sure all the boxes are ticked, and then there's the issue of ensuring that we're being efficient in bundling enough together to publish at the same time. So I would say, in answer to your question, probably from the start of the point where we look to enact the legislation through the consultation process, you are probably looking at the guts of 8 months to a year. And I realise that seems a long time, and if I was waiting for the legislation to go in myself, I would be questioning it. But to ensure that all the processes have gone through and using our resources in the most efficient manner that we can, unfortunately, it does take quite some time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next two speakers will be Councillor Harkin and Councillor Logue. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the DFI team for coming in today to take our questions, and also for the report. It was very detailed and very helpful. And first of all, the FI for finally completing the works on Craigan Hill to improve the safety there. I think it is much appreciated by residents that use Brook Park on a regular basis, and by the local school, Rosemount Primary School. And it is making a big difference, because I use it myself, and I cross there with usually a 5-year-old in my hand and a pram, and having the lights there just makes it far easier. It's far safer, and it's better for drivers as well. So thank you on behalf of everybody that was happy to see that done. Yeah, look, I concur with Councillor Riley. I think that we have to do everything we can to facilitate moving people into their homes as quickly as possible. We have a massive housing crisis here in the city and in the district, and I just think we have to remove obstacles with urgency in order to get people who are waiting moved in as quickly as possible. So whatever, I think if there'll be a united message coming from the chamber today to try and get that resolved. And then, look, I've got several points. One is, I'm just curious about the private roads issue. I'm curious how often you're in a situation where a developer doesn't fully complete their responsibilities in regard to the road development, and then where DFI has to chase after them to try and get them to complete it, or then has to pursue them through the courts, through enforcement, or then DFI has to step in itself. And I'm curious from the point of view of like the use of DFI's resources and kind of costs. So if there's, because that's in the report, and I think that that's important. The second one is, the last time we talked to you, it was when Stormont had been restored or slightly after, and you'd had an influx of some money, which I believe you basically said it's spent already, such as the need in terms of the road network in particular. So so I read in the report that you know, that you're receiving an increased level of correspondence from political representatives and residents calling in about potholes, about blocked gullies, about defective streetlights, the things that we are getting on a day-to-day basis. And I'm conscious that we are moving into the winter months, and likely you will get an overload of calls from us and from others again. So I'm just like, that's so, but that in your report you say there's reduced staffing to actually deal with this, and that is very, very worrying. Now that what is happening here, as you know, you don't need me to tell you, is that our road network, despite your efforts, it continues to deteriorate. And that deterioration takes the form of more potholes, more gullies not getting, you know, cleaned out, more streetlight issues. So there's a desperate need for that to be addressed, but there's also, I mean, people need to be able to answer phones and respond to emails. So I'm just, if you could just talk a bit about that, because that is a grave concern, I think, where at a certain point, the level of frustration that people will have will just grow. And of course, that impacts on you know, the DFA and the DFI workforce, which is unfair, given that this is about budgets and about what you're having a capacity, what your capacity is to do. And we've also talked about the limited service policy, which I think a lot of members have expressed frustration about in the past in terms of addressing, only being able to address potholes when they get to a certain point, and you can guarantee that they will get to that point at some fairly soon, and we'll see more of that during the winter, right? And so and again, it's the very things that people are calling in about, you know, grass cutting or gully emptying and potholes. But there's also, right, see, in terms of because there's been a lot of discussion about road safety. So road safety, are you concerned that about the department's ability to ensure or guarantee that sight lines at bends and junctions will be given priority in terms of like addressing that very, very quickly? Because there's, I mean, I think you're constantly making a kind of call as to what is urgent and absolutely necessary. But at a certain point, even when you, because of the funding constraints, even absolutely necessary work doesn't necessarily get done. So if you could speak to those issues, really appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I can bring in Councillor Logue, Patricia.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in. I'm not part of this committee, but again, thanks for letting me in. And I'd just like to welcome the representatives from the FI to the meeting this afternoon. There's just a few items that I would like to bring up. I suppose the first one has already been touched on. But while it's not an area I represent, I just want, because it's such a big strategic part of our council district, I just want to touch on the developer's proposal to change the planning conditions. Now, I'm on the planning committee, so I just want to be careful about what I say here. But I do know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the developer didn't come in to yourselves to the 20th of September looking for this change of condition. And I do appreciate that, given your limited resources, that you have engaged with the developer on this. But can you advise us at this stage, what are your thoughts, your initial thoughts on what the developer is proposing? And have you any concerns about what their proposal is? as I have no doubt it will be extra monetary ask from the department. And just the next thing, Councillor has already alluded to it, and that was the restriction, the no waiting sign down at the Free Dairy corner. And I suppose I would just like to add my concern to that, because we have really, I live in that area, so I see it every day, the congestion that that is happening around that area. We also have a dedicated bus lane, not lane, sorry, a bus drop off on the other side of the road. Now that is being used by cars at the minute, and I do know that the painting to sort of advise motorists of that is of very poor quality. So if that could be redone again, and can I ask, you know, how is this going to be monitored when the legislation does come into effect regarding the no stopping at that corner? And I do know that later on in the report you have mentioned works at the flyover. There's been quite a considerable lot of damage that was carried out, especially during the summer months, on the flyover and under the flyover that I have been liaising with your office about, although they have said that a lot of it was a policing matter, but I do know that you have plans to do a bit of work and around that area. So if you could just maybe elaborate a wee bit more what exactly you are planning for there, because I do know that there is an urban village public realm scheme going to be doing some work in and around that area, and I would like there to be a wee bit of joint up thinking on that. And just finally, just allow me, this chair, can you give me any indication about the residence parking scheme in the Bogside? This has just been running. It's been a saga that's been running from 2017, 2018. And I do know that when I asked about it before, we were waiting on about the Rugby Road scheme. Now, that answer has been given for nearly 2.5 years now, maybe over that, 3 if I'm rightly. So if I'm right in thinking, and in the meantime, the residents of the Bogside and the surrounding different areas are still suffering the extreme traffic congestion and not being able to park outside their own homes. So can you please, and I understand you mightn't be able to give me a full update here at this meeting, I wouldn't expect it, but I would be very, very grateful if I could get some update within the near future on that matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just before you speak, we do have as Karen stated there, we do have a meeting organised with DFI and NI Water in regards to unadopted roads and to try and get a working group set up in relation to that, to deal with that. So you can comment if you wish in that regard, but we are working to deal with that issue. But I'll pass over to yourself, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to the unadopted sites, at the minute there's probably around 72 unadopted sites on our list of backlogs, and there are the vast majority of those sites, unfortunately, the developer has generally gone out of business, and the value of the bond does not cover the value of the work necessary to bring the infrastructure to an adoptable standard. Now, this has been a historical issue over many years, where the bonds that we have charged the developers have not kept up with inflation. 2 years ago, we rectified that by bringing in a new set of bond rates to address any issues around shortfalls in the existing bonds. But I suppose ultimately the provision of infrastructure is the responsibility of the developer. The bond is an insurance policy. In some cases, unfortunately, that insurance policy falls short. And as a department, we're not funded at the moment to make up the shortfall between the value of the bond and the value of the works necessary to carry out the work. There may be scope in the future to, if the department was more adequately funded, to look to address those, despite the fact that this is not a department's responsibility to do so legally. But I certainly appreciate the frustrations and the difficulties that it causes a number of residents in those unadopted sites. And if there is a way that we can work forward with the residents to obtain the funding to carry out the works, the DFI Roads would be content to carry out those works. The point about the state of the roads and the limited service, I think I've mentioned at previous meetings that we as engineers know that this is not the most effective way to maintain our road network, and that a limited service over a long period of time will result in the gradual deterioration of that network. We're constrained by the funding that we have, and this is seen as the most effective way of spreading that funding effectively across all the network. I can confirm that there are a couple of pilot projects being carried out in areas that look at routes rather than, so the inspections would be carried out on a route basis and all defects along those routes would be fixed, not just the most serious. It's a significant step outside our current process, but it's one that we're looking at to potentially most effectively use our funding. Now, that will mean that some of the rural roads are inspected and addressed more frequently, but the converse of that is that some of our more significant routes, our A-class roads, will not be inspected as regularly. And that's we're going to analyse how that goes in the pilot project and see if it's suitable for rolling out. But at the moment, our limited service is based on the hierarchy of inspections with the use of the road. With regards to road safety and grass cuts, obviously we're funded to carry out 2 grass cuts per year, and we try to ensure that the first grass cut is completed by the July holidays and the second one is completed by this time of year. However, if there are safety issues, we will, if possible, divert our grass cutting operations to address those safety issues. And it includes the safety issues that were raised with regards to sight lines or bends and junctions, because we recognise that those areas are a high risk if people can't see out of those junctions. What I would say is, with regards to the analysis of accidents, unfortunately, and I think it was in the department's safety project that was recently released, that the vast majority of accidents are due to driver error rather than engineering or vehicle issues. And I think we probably need to examine everybody's behaviours as road users, especially, and I certainly don't exclude myself from this, to ensure that our roads are safer. But if there are specific areas of sightlines or junctions that councillors have concerns of, I would encourage them to use the online reporting facility or to contact our local section office, and we'll look to inspect and address them. Councillor Oak mentioned the planning conditions for Core Roundabout. I'm confident that the proposals brought forward by the developer can be developed to the point where the Core Roundabout can be upgraded. As I mentioned previously, our focus is on ensuring that the proposals put forward by the developer are safe, they cater for all road users, and that they help traffic progression, and none of the junctions or areas approaching the roundabout are prejudiced with regards to the proposals. That's what the original conditions sought to achieve, and that's still our objective. There was mention of a restriction sign and how it's enforced and the parking down there. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that particular issue, but I'm more than happy to come back to the council with regards to the issue. With regards to, I think it was Lecky Road flyover that was mentioned, with if there are particular issues that can be picked up by our inspectors that need to be resolved with regards to the road condition, then that'll be picked up by our inspectors. The long-term aspirations of the council, which they have been engaging with ourselves on with regards to the Realm project, I understand that takes in part of that area, and we'll certainly look to ensure that that addresses any structural defects or issues around that area. With regards to residents parking, you quite rightly mentioned that residents parking has been delayed or put on hold for a period while the effectiveness of the residents parking within Rugby Road was analysed. That obviously became operational in 2018, and the Minister, when he came into office this year, was presented with a paper outlining how effective that particular scheme was and what lessons can be learned from it. A number of issues were raised by the Minister, and we were asked as a department to update the report. That report is now back with the Minister for consideration, and we're hoping that it'll be published in the fairly short term, and that'll obviously provide us with a framework for prioritising and implementing any future residents parking schemes. With regards to the original effort to implement a residents parking scheme in the Bogside area, unfortunately, a significant amount of resistance was conveyed to the department at that time, and that unfortunately resulted in us delaying that particular scheme. But we're more than happy to look to reassess it and implement it if we can, if we carry out the process of consultation with the local residents. If we can get everybody on board, or at least the majority of people on board, then we would be happy to implement that scheme and look to implement others across the city centre and across the city.
I'd like to bring Karen in here at this stage.
Just members, for your information and to build on what Daniel has said, we are taking forward the Realm scheme within the Urban Villages area, and that business case has now gone to the Executive Office for consideration, and we hope to be able to move forward, and we've met Daniel and his team in order to see how we can engage with them on that, in order to make sure that we're delivering as best we can, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver the maximum amount of that project in the coming years. So thank you, Chair.
Our next two speakers are Councillor McHugh and Councillor Tierney. So Councillor McHugh.
Thank you, Chair, and again thanks to Dan, Sam and Brian for the presentation today. I think just as a councillor, it's appropriate to thank DFA staff for your help and cooperation on a personal level throughout the previous year on constituency issues that I would bring to you and your team. And by and large, officers, when you're dealing with them and bringing an issue to their attention, they come at it with a can-do attitude. And I know it's not easy trying to resolve issues, particularly when you're operating with restricted budgets and often maybe restricted staff. So just think it's important to record that. Thanks. Just to make a comment on a strategic level, I want to welcome the recent announcement from the DFA Minister on the intention to go ahead with the A5, which will be transformative for this city and district, not just in an economic sense, but more importantly on a road safety level. So I welcome that. Other issues I just want to raise is general regarding the street lighting. I know DFA over the previous number of years have started the rollout of the LED lighting. Is there any indication of a timeline of when that will be completed throughout the district? because we do have obviously areas where you have two different sets of street lights. The other issue is private streets, and I want to share my frustration as well with other councillors that have previously mentioned it. I think in my time as a councillor, it's probably one of the most frustrating issues that we deal with. We have constantly getting representation from residents who are living in estates that are still not adopted. You know, they pay a lot of money often in private estates, and they're sitting years later suffering busted wheel rims and busted tyres, all because the estate's complete apart from the road surface, and the contractors, in my opinion, make a lot of money, but then when it comes to the completion of the estate, they're getting away in the smoke. I know you touched on it there, but is there anything that road service can do in terms of a review of legislation or introduction of new legislation that could help expedite the adoption process? I'm just mindful of one in my own area, and I'm sure other dairy councils are acutely aware of it as well. Riverview Manor. It's 5 years now, I think, the estate has been lived in, and still the contractor gives assurance after assurance that he's going to appoint a contractor to complete the estate, but it's never done. Most recently, about 3 weeks ago, I was in contact again with DFI, and they had said that their officials were to meet with the developer, Mr. Ward, who intends to complete it some date in November. So I'm just wondering, is there any further update on that particular issue? There are other issues to do with road traffic jamming in areas like Ergon Road, but I'll put that on my sheet. So that's me, Chair. Go on.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to DFI officials for attending here today, and thanks to their colleagues who we would deal with on a more daily basis to try and get issues resolved. I do have to say that I had a quick check through my email inbox there to look at the responses from the section office, and I have a habit of asking for a time frame for something to be carried out, and every email that I've had back from DFI since April this year is unable to provide a time frame of when they're going to carry out some of the simplest of jobs. You know, we're not talking about the call roundabout or big huge jobs. It's small things like disabled parking bays being repainted, like Councillor Riley has already talked about, like street lighting potentially being repaired, and we're not being able to give a time frame. That's really frustrating for us, but it's even more frustrating for the people that are contacting us about those issues. I presume that is down to budget constraints and you not being able to plan out routine repairs and things like that, but I would like a response as to why that's happening. I don't need to tell anybody on here, Chair, and particularly probably not DFI officials, how big of a housing crisis we're going through in this city and district, and indeed across the north, if not across the island. But there are 98 brand new homes within my DAA which are unable to be allocated at the minute, and these are at Templemore Crescent and Fustina Terrace. I understand that there are planning conditions that need to be discharged, and I understand that the department and the contractor have to come to some type of agreement. I also understand that the contractor has provided a solution to DFI, and I would like an update on that, because the majority of those homes have been already allocated. People just can't move in because of these restrictions, and I would have been told that it was originally a 5-week delay. I'm now hearing that it could be after Christmas before these people get to move on. For anybody who deals with housing queries, you will know how long people have been on the list, how hard they've been fighting to get a home, and how relieved they will be when they got that letter of offer. And now to be dragged on and delayed, potentially to after Christmas, in my view, is unacceptable. And I would implore the department to do whatever they can with the developer and with planners to try and get this matter resolved as a matter of urgency. There are some other things that I'm not going to mention, Chair, that are on my sheet, but I do want to flag up that there was a speed survey and a traffic volume survey carried out in Mazines Park almost 2 years ago. And I understand that no resident or myself who was actually involved and called for that speed survey to take place have found out the results of that survey or found out what the department planned to do given the results of that survey, because I have no doubt that that survey will have shown up that traffic is exceeding the speed limit in that area, so therefore something needs to be done. So I would like an update on that as well. I would just like to join with Councillor Logue when she mentions around the Bogside parking scheme. That is something which definitely needs to be looked at. It's not an area that I represent. It's the area that I was born and raised in. My family have lived in that area for over 40 years, and I don't remember a time when there wasn't parking issues in that area, and I've got several family members that live in different streets off it. Councillor Lowe talked about the resident scheme being announced in 2018, and that was a positive step forward, and everybody was looking forward to it. And then the representative from DFI talked about why it fell down, and I think if you look at why it fell down and the number of permits and when people could visit and all of that, it was never going to work anyway. But this was actually first discussed with government representatives in 2007 when Conor Murphy was the DSD minister. That's an awful long time to be strung along and to try and deal with this, because these residents are dealing with this every single day of the week. And as I say, I don't remember in the last 40 years when there wasn't traffic problems there. So I would agree with Councillor Logue. I appreciate the update. I don't really understand why residents in the Bogside are being told, well, we have to wait to see how it works out somewhere else. That's, in my view, comparing apples with oranges. There needs to be a designated and a custom-made parking scheme for that area of the Bogside, which eventually I would like to see spreading out towards the university quarter, out the Duncragan Road direction, because those residents are facing it as well. But to say that we have to wait, I think Councillor Logue said she's been hearing that response about waiting 2.5 years to find out how it gets on somewhere else. I just don't buy that. There needs to be something done about that area, and I would agree. We've got the update now. We're waiting, as the representative has said, Chair, we're waiting on the Minister to release and publish the findings of the previous one, but there needs to be work done on the Bogside now to try and resolve that issue, because then people have been dealing with that for a lifetime, and that's not an exaggeration, for an absolute lifetime. There are some other issues which I have on my sheet, particularly around, I suppose, more day-to-day issues. But Chair, I've been a member of this council for the last 10, 11 years. And Karen, you'll remember we were at a similar meeting like this heading into the winter time a number of years ago. There was no mention of cutback of what might be classed as general repairs. But when we got into the middle of the winter, we were told that DFI didn't have funding to fix individual streetlights. They didn't have funding to do this. They didn't have funding to do that. Are we looking at something like that this winter, where we're being told if one streetlight's out in a particular area, we're not coming to fix it? If there are other small issues due to budget constraints that your department aren't going to be able to fix them, because I would rather know that now and be able to plan and be able to lobby government to try and support you to do it, than wait until we're in the middle of it to find out that that's where we're at and have to react then, because that's too little too late in my view. But thanks very much for your attendance here today, and I look forward to your answers. Thank you.
Right, Daniel.
Thank you. Just taking them in order. With regards to the street lighting and LED timeline rollout, you'll have seen in the report a significant reduction in street lighting capital works for the current year. And the reason for that is because a lot of the old sodium lights are still within their lifespan, and the funding that has been allocated previously to LED upgrades of our street lighting systems has been diverted to safety critical issues or safety critical projects. The intention and the hope is that in the coming year, funding will allow us to re-engage with the LED upgrade and allocate significantly more resources The intention previously had been to complete the LED upgrades in pretty much all areas by the current year. So I think we're probably at, I need to check with my street lighting colleagues, but we're well over 70% with regards to the replacement as it stands. From a private streets point of view, Riverview Manor was mentioned, and I am aware of the issues with Riverview Manor, and the primary issue is DFI Rivers and the developer are engaged in discussions with increasing the outlet size for the drainage for the development. From a roads point of view, there's sufficient, the developer's still engaged on that site, so there's not very few issues with regards to roads, and once the DFI Rivers issue has been sorted out, then the adoption process for that particular development can proceed. The issues around the department and the section office being unable to provide a time frame for the reinstatement of disabled parking or street lighting repairs. A lot of the resource that we have in our section offices are by necessity diverted towards safety related tasks and safety related projects. And while I appreciate that doesn't address the day-to-day issues and frustrations that people have with regards to defective streetlights or markings that need to be reinstated, I hope councillors appreciate that our limited resources, both staffing and financial, are being allocated to those safety-related issues that could have safety impacts on members of the public. That said, if there are particular issues, as I mentioned earlier, please send them in to us. They will be addressed when resources allow. Councillor Tilly, you mentioned Festina Terrace. It's another one that I'm fully aware of, and I appreciate the frustration of residents who are allocated housing in that particular development and are unable to access it at this stage. The conditions were imposed as part of the planning conditions in 2021, and those conditions could have been completed at any point after the planning permission was agreed. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, we're in a position where to discharge those conditions, the developer has come up with a proposal that requires a significant period of time to implement. I know that conversations are ongoing with my planning colleagues and those involved in the A2 Buncrana Road, because it impacts on that, to examine other ways of progressing this particular or discharging this particular condition. And those conversations are ongoing, but I know that everybody's focused on trying to get those people into that development as quickly as possible. You mentioned a speed and traffic volume survey, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name of the road.
Mazines Park. Mazines Park.
Mazines Park. If you don't mind, I'll take that one away because it's not one that I'm aware of, and I'll update you with regards to the outcome of the speed and traffic volume survey. The Rugby Road report in itself will provide the department with best practice guidelines on how residents' parking schemes are implemented, or the best way that they can be implemented. And while each resident's parking will be individual to the location, because there's different factors and constraints on each potential area of the implementation of residents' parking, it will provide us with guidelines that we will be able to follow to try and ensure the success of any potential scheme in that area. And that's on the understanding that any resident parking scheme, especially in a large and growing city like Derry City, will need to take into account the emerging transportation plans like the North West Transport Plan and the associated parking restrictions and parking proposals that form part of that plan. So all these things need to be tied together to provide an individual residence parking scheme that actually contains the highest level of potential for success. And that's why the department have been waiting on the results of the Rugby Road scheme, because that is best practice, and that's a scheme that had a significant amount of support, and we want to understand why that was and to implement that across all our potential residence parking schemes. You mentioned that there are restrictions on the delivery of maintenance activities. You're absolutely right. I know I've mentioned the limited service restrictions, and that takes into account a lot of the white lining and street lighting and other resource-focused maintenance activities. Last year, there was uncertainty of how much funding we had for that particular set of activities. This year, there's no such, not confusion, but we're absolutely committed to carrying out whatever works are required to comply with our limited service policy, regardless of how much that takes. So I hope that provides some sort of reassurance that this year, certainly, there'll be no let up with regards to the service that we provide, as long as it complies with our limited service policy, and that will continue through to the new financial year.
Maybe just to step in on that one, just from a more local section office level as well, but in relation to the road markings and, renewal of disabled parking bays and that sort of thing, there's a considerable volume of that work issued to our contractor. At present, there are a limited number of road marking contractors in the province, and some of them seem to be employed in Donegal at the minute, an extensive renewal of road markings on their major roads as well. So that really is competing with our own contractors' availability to do the work that we have issued to them. The work has been prioritised and passed out to them, and we're doing everything we can to try and progress that, and have met with them recently as well to see if they can bring in additional resources to try and speed that work up as well.
Thank you. Our next two speakers will be Councillor Mooney and Alderman Hussey. Councillor Mooney.
Chair, thanks very much, member of the committee, but grateful for, and just one issue, Chair, through the pack here just earlier on, I only got an opportunity to do that. Page 39 of the pack of the document, structural maintenance and drainage, and one particular issue, U1542 Knockwellan Park. It's just to ask Daniel or Sam, probably would be the better person. I'm dealing with a sort of ongoing issue with flooding at 82 to 86 Knockwellan Park, water emanating from a local school playground, but it often leads to persistent flooding on that street, and I see that they're down for structural maintenance on the drainage. I was wondering, would they anticipate any works or any maintenance works be located at that location, and will it be directed towards any of that flooding? Now, I don't know if they've answered now, but happy to if they would apply in due course. But thanks, Chair, for letting me on, even though I'm not a member of the committee. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and apology to yourself and the delegation for not being here for the presentation. It's a pretty short presentation. It didn't take that long to actually read through, and I accept it's an interim or progress report from the main spring report, which is the work for the year ahead. With reference to gullies, the aim is to annually clear all gullies at least once. That's the target. The achievement was 82% last year. The fifth that have not been addressed, can I presume that now we're in 6 months in to the new term, that those fifth have been addressed? Or, you know, are they still sitting there? Because again, we're coming into a winter period and we don't want to face difficulties of ponding, etc., etc. That causes damage to the surface if it's not dealt with. It's not on the report, but generally with regard to signage, whether it's directional signage, safety signage, or whatever, I am increasingly perturbed at the state of the signage on our roads. I've travelled the A5 quite a few times, and I think somebody has gone along and actually cleaned signs along the A5 because you can be seen. Whereas you come into our own area, particularly off the A routes, and there are signs, they're just not visible, whether it's through pure dirt and scum or it's overgrown, etc. Now that's a road safety issue with regard to warning signs, etc. And it's also an aesthetic issue with regard to people coming into our area. So, you know, I know and accept funding is low, but these are things that, you know, a small amount of money could have quite a large impact, generally speaking. As I say, I know this is the interim report, but Sam, you'll know that in the main report, there are schemes that have been sitting there for a considerable length of time. I'll not name any of them individually being parochial, but you'd be aware of ones that are sitting there for a long, long period of time, going back before the existence of this amalgamated council. So we're talking decades. And I just hope at some stage that we'll begin to see progress in that. Again, finance and resources. Traffic calming, and I know that yourself, Chair, will be aware. Again, I'm not going to name the individual site, but there is a site in our own Derrick area where both myself and Alderman Kerrigan have been approached about the potential for some traffic calming, a couple of road bumps or whatever, just to slow people down. There's actually a sign there which indicates that there are road humps, but there's no humps. And that has been pointed out. You know, so what is the scenario there? Why is there a sign, but no actual infrastructure relative to the sign? Again, on the white sheet, I can pass that on later on as to the exact location. The adoptions, I welcome the 22 that are there. It's a pity there are still 52 outstanding. We know the rationale or the reasons for that. I welcome the fact that we will have a meeting. And I trust that prior to that meeting, we'll have a list of the actual unadopted sites, how long they have been unadopted, because as has been rightly pointed out, it's not all down to road service. We have involvement of NI Water, who I understand will be at that meeting, but also the individual developers who just walk away from schemes and leave people in the lurch. These are people who are paying rates. And within that rate, there's an element of the regional rate. The regional rate goes to Stormont. That's what the road service budget comes from. So the road service themselves have a responsibility to address the issue of unadoption because of reasons outside their own control. Because they're taking money from the ratepayers in regard to that. So I also know that it's not just an issue in this area. In fact, I know that in the committee yesterday, my own party representative, Robbie Butler, has brought this to the attention of the committee and a previous committee meeting. So I'm hoping that, you know, the committee will become aware of the situation and that they will begin to robustly enforce or ensure that this issue is dealt with going forward. Quick one then. Amenability of officials to site meetings with individual councillors. I think over this last year, 2 years, I've had one. I've had requests for others. Nobody's come back to me on them. It's just an email now. I haven't contacted anybody direct, but with regard to meeting on a particular site with a particular issue. And finally, a most useful weapon that I've found in the past is the DEA meetings, where we can drill down into the particular issues in a DEA with regard to roads issues going forward. I'd like to see the establishment or the re-establishment of that if the personnel are available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Do you wish to pass comment?
Yes, thank you. With regards to the drainage at Knockwellan Park, is that something, Sam, that you're familiar with?
Knockwellan Park, Sean, my understanding was that the drainage works had been completed in Knockwellan. Now we will have a wee look at the addresses you provided there, which I think was 82 to 86.
That's right.
Just in case there's a problem there that they're not aware of, but we'll include that in our list and have that investigated.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sam.
It's mentioned that the gullies percentage was 82%. Generally, in past years, it would have been higher than that, although there's always a number of gullies that we can't get to for one reason or another. Sometimes it's cars parking over them or similar issues. This year, I would have to hold our hands up and say that we've had resource issues with regards to engaging both our internal and external contractors to carry out gully emptying. Hopefully, a lot of those resource issues will have been resolved by efforts of local section office staff liaising with both our term contractors and our local O&M.
I think maybe just to help out on that one, the percentage of gullies cleaned was a bit less than normal last year due to our contractor losing one of his squads. But he has now employed a new squad and has a gully emptier permanently going in both the Strabane and Derry areas. And this year we're ahead of schedule with the percentage of gully emptying, so we should be able to catch up during the current financial year on that one.
Thank you. The condition of signage, this has been raised in a number of areas, and unfortunately the resources that we have are directed towards ensuring that our regulatory signage, such as stop signs, give way signs, traffic related signs, are in good condition, and the assessment of those signs is carried out by our roads inspectors on a regular basis. If there are in particular signs that have a safety impact or a safety risk to the road user, then they're certainly ones that we should be picking up on and that we would look to address if they are offering a safety risk. So if they're not picked up by our inspectors, or if our inspectors, because a lot of our rural roads are inspected on a 6-monthly basis, if they're not picked up at one inspection, then it could be a year before they're seen again. So if there are any that have a safety related issue, then please can I ask that they're brought to our attention, because we would be as keen as yourselves to address those if we can. It was mentioned that there are a number of schemes that perhaps have been on our council reports for a number of years that haven't been progressed. I think our scheme lists are by necessity an evolving list. You'll often find that there are roads down to be resurfaced because they're in a condition that ensures that they are on our priority list. But following a particularly wet winter or particularly bad rain event like in 2017, that our list changes to reflect the new priorities. And if schemes that have been on our list previously haven't been delivered, then I would probably point to that as a reason why they haven't been delivered, that our changing priorities have forced them back down the list. They're almost certainly still on that list, and we will hope to get to them. But unfortunately, other priorities have overtaken them. With regards to traffic calming, you mentioned that you'd pick up on that one within the inquiry sheet, so we'll certainly be able to address it. The planning meeting, the list of unadopted sites, and you're probably aware that the infrastructure or the infrastructure committee or the committee for infrastructure has picked up on unadopted streets and roads in the past, and there was a 2012 inquiry that resulted in a number of recommendations that would help to address some of the issues around unadopted developments, and the department implemented the vast majority of the recommendations from that report. Certainly, it's recognised within that report that the department, to an extent, while it has no legal obligation with regards to funding the difference between the works required and the value of the remaining bonds, there is almost a moral, because people buy their houses based on the insurance policy that the developer takes out with the bondholders. And I think that's been recognised in the past when the department had sufficient funding that, under the designation of the minister in charge at the time, that a certain amount of funding was made available to address some of those backlog sites. And I suppose that's an avenue that perhaps could be explored moving forward. But I would stress again that the focus of our limited resources that we have, by necessity, need to be directed towards safety-related issues. And while I appreciate that homeowners within these affected developments are extremely frustrated and it affects their daily lives, and I have utmost sympathy for them, unfortunately, it means that the department, as it stands, cannot or does not have the remit to carry out additional works to fund that shortfall. The reference to site meeting requests, certainly and I know my colleagues beside me would probably agree that if there is a site meeting request, we do our very best, and I know my teams do their very best to go out and meet councillors, because quite often the issues being raised by councillors aren't the issue of one person, it's the issues of multiple persons, and attending meetings with councillors probably saves the department in the volume of meetings that we would otherwise have to engage with individuals on a particular issue. So certainly I would encourage my staff, and I would hope that they would attend any future meetings if the councillors request them, and certainly give a good reason why if they don't. With regards to the re-establishment of the DEA meetings, I mean, I'm not sure why the DEA meetings previously were paused, possibly due to resource issues. I know certainly since I've been in post, prior to any of the council reports, the DEA meetings probably would have been carried out then. And it's certainly something we can look at moving forward.
You, Councillor Deeney, Caitlin?
Quickly, Chair, sorry, I'm just going back to Knockwellan about the drainage. I think there was some works carried out, I think you're right, but just I had sent on more videos then after of even flooding after that. So just if the correspondence could come back to myself and Sean, I'm sure Sean has also sent on them videos, but thank you.
Thank you. Just a few points myself, if you're content. And again, a lot of points have been raised, and I do thank the members for all their comments, and I do thank for your time and for your response. Welcome the work, particularly I suppose in our own DA, street lighting in Castlereagh, resurfacing on Kathleen Road. Even there's a bit of resurfacing in our park, which had been requested for a long time in Newton Stewart, and that was done, so very much appreciated. Quick wee question there in regards to the element of surface dressing, is that now a thing that is effectively now ended? You know, in regards to effectively the loose stone element, I had been informed that that was sort of just been used up, the last of that, and really our area, sort of in the western part, was the last area to really get that, and then that would effectively be ended to that extent. It does state in the 23 to 24 year that the grass cutting was carried out twice on all the rural roads, and I'm assuming now it will be reduced to one cut for the rural roads. That's the issue there in regards to how it is cut, and there's often the reference of it is cut at the side of the road instead of maybe at more of an angle to try and cut the overhanging, particularly in some of those rural roads. And it was just a query in that regard. Does the Western Division, is that entirely subbed out to contractors? For my information is that the equipment that the Western Division did have, the tractors and the mowers, have been disposed of. And I'm wondering, did that money come back into the Western Division, or has that money been swallowed up in a main DFI pot? Because I would have thought if it was for the equipment that Western area had, that it would be still remained in that budget, but maybe it's not. Let me see. There's you have again. We'll touch again on the adoption of the unadopted roads, and in regards to the unadopted housing developments, and again even our local publication, the Tyrone Constitution, there has a mention of the Riverview Manor again on the front page again today. Again, touching on the gully emptying, does DFI, do we have any of our own equipment in that regard, or is that all subbed out? I did, to be fair, I'll pass comment that I did see one on some of the rural roads and outside Castleberg recently, and it was positive to see them, but they did mention that most of the time they are called into the more urban areas, and oftentimes if there's a machine down or a team down, it's a rural area that misses out and it's brought into the more urban settings. And a couple of very quick ones. There's a traffic calming issue that Alderman Mussey has raised, and to be fair, I corresponded with a DFI official, I don't know if he's still there or not, in 2019 about it, and asked to start the process on it, and I might as well talk to that well. You know, realistically, like, I got no response. He phoned me by mistake about 6 months later and couldn't get off the phone quick enough. Yeah, you know, so it has been raised before, and that's just the blunt honestly. There's a lot of DFI officials are 100% will work with you, but some of them just, but that's everywhere, and I accept that. The other wee thing is your grit boxes. You know, there was the request to put in grit boxes, but you never get any reply. You know, you can put in a request for one, and you're told that there's a long waiting list before we will decide if we will get one or not in an area. But you're never informed if it's been successful or it's not been successful. You could drive around 6 months later and see if there's one there or not. But there wasn't a feedback as a thing that I had noted. Even just it's not been successful email, something like that. Whenever. If we are the individuals that raise it, because oftentimes it is the residents that contact you in regards to the issue. So again, I'm trying to be more overall than going specific into or specific to areas. Other than that, that seems to be happening. But again, I take on board that effectively you are having difficulties with staffing levels, and I would have seen that and spoke to various DFI staff over the time that it just the job didn't seem as attractive, and there seemed to be a higher staff turnover or difficulty keeping staff, and it just seemed as budget constraints, I suppose, is your main issue. But other than that, that's the height of the few comments that I just wanted to touch base with you. So thank you.
Thank you. With regards to surface dressing is very much a good weather summer activity. So often we refer to it as the surface dressing season, and that usually lasts from when the roads heat up enough to take the surface dressing material and then the stone on top of it. So if it was late in the season, then that the development that you mentioned, or the road that you mentioned, would probably have been one of the last ones. In the past, we would have engaged our internal contracting resource to complete surface dressing in Western Division. A lot of the other divisions didn't have that facility, and unfortunately, due to staffing resource and equipment becoming older, this year was the last year we would have that internal resource to carry out that surface dressing. From here on in will be the same as other divisions, in which we would use our external contractor to carry out all our surface dressing works. With regards to grass cuts, I mean, we are funded for a single swathe. If there are, and that's basically the width of the mower attachment, if there are overgrown bits of material that are outside that but extend out, unfortunately, we're just not funded to go back down the road. Ideally, we would have in the past. Unfortunately, we're just not in a position where we can do that at the moment. You mentioned gully emptying. We do have internal resource for gully emptying, and I know our O&M colleagues, our internal contractor colleagues, received a delivery of a number of new gully emptiers. So we do have the capacity to carry out some of that works internally. And certainly from speaking to the operations managers, the fact that we're not doing surface dressing from here on in, that means there may be the potential to carry out more gully cleaning internally. But because they're very good at what they do with regards to carrying out pothole repairs, what we tend to do is focus most of their resource that they have available on those duties. And if if they have excess resource, then we can put that towards gully emptying. Otherwise, we're using our external contractor. With regards to grip boxes, I can only apologise if you didn't receive a response. Certainly, if it's a request through our section office, once the assessment is carried out, we would generally carry out a follow-up and just say whether it's been successful or not. If it's through the NI Direct website, then there's currently no facility to update the user automatically, but the requests for potholes or grip boxes will be updated online, but the user would have to go back through using the reference number that they received to get an update. And that's an issue that's been raised previously about getting an automatic update. But unfortunately, there's just not the facility on the current system. You also mentioned staffing constraints, and you're absolutely right to bring up the issues we have, not just in the Department for Infrastructure, but other technical departments. Recruiting staff, there is a very robust staff management process going on at the minute to try and get and externalize all our recruitment competitions and promotion competitions. But as you mentioned, the staff, or not staffing, the wages, salaries pressures in the private sector are such at the minute that it becomes difficult for public departments to match within the wage structures that we have. So certainly we're trying to get the people in. We're currently sitting at around 25% vacancies in Western Division, and that's based on a staff structure following VES back in 2016 that was based on a structural maintenance allocation of around £85 million and no machinery of government, and that was the minimum staff structure we needed to carry out those functions, and we're 25% below that at the minute. So the pressures are very real, and it's acknowledged by certainly the senior management within the department that those need addressed. We're constrained by the structures that we have to try and take people on, but we're certainly looking to take on people in more unorthodox ways. And one of the ways recently has been the Skills Academy route that we have established within DFI roads, which bring in school leavers, give them training, give them a probation period, and then if they're suitable, then we take them on as as TGs within the department. And that's looking to sort of fill some of the staffing structure from the bottom up, which I think is a big step forward for the department.
Very, very much appreciated for your time and for your response there, because as I say, I do thank you very much for the work that you are doing and for coming in and taking the flak. You know, you do come in before the committee and you do get a sore touch times, but it is very much appreciated. And just before we close here, I'll just hand over to Karen, who just wants to pass comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through you, just on behalf of the officer team, to thank Daniel and his staff. As members are aware, we probably work with Daniel's team closest of all the government departments on a number and range of strategic projects and local projects, and also operational issues, probably on a daily basis. Myself and the team would be in contact with Daniel or his wider team, and certainly the work that they've done over the last year in terms of moving forward the City Deal projects, in terms of moving forward a vast range of green infrastructure, regeneration, environmental issues, as well as all of the work that they do with our planning team in terms of applications. You know, they always work with us in a very positive and constructive way, and we as officers really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Chair, through you, just before they go, do you mind if I ask, see the skills academy that you were talking about there, Daniel? Could you send us out more information just around that? I certainly wasn't aware of it, but I would like to learn a wee bit about it if you don't mind, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are free to leave instead of having to sit now for the next, hopefully, an hour instead of 2. Members, item 6 is chairperson's business, and I have none, and I'm content enough with that. So we'll move on to. I will give 1 minute here to Karen here in regards to yes item she wishes to raise.
Yeah, through you, members, it's just to remind members, we've sent out an email earlier today to members in relation to the Halloween costume swap workshops that we're holding under Recycling Week and in terms of the circular economy. So the events are being held in the Alley Theatre this Saturday, the 12th of October at 11 to 3 p.m. And then in this building, the Guildhall, on Saturday, the 19th of October, again from 11 to 3. So it's just to make members aware of that, and feel free to put that out through any of the networks that you have to encourage people to take part in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Item 7 is matters arising from the E&R committee, and with Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. ER 230/24 ROSPA inspection process, and you'll see on the second paragraph that I had mentioned Ballinagard and asked for an update on that. Now I know Ballinagard is referenced in item 15, but it's a separate issue. But yet no, there's still no wider update on the Ballinagard process where it's at. And if we could have that, it would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, members, we have appointed the contractor for Ballinagard, and they are in the process of mobilising, and will start on site. So I think that's the update in terms of the park. And again, we'll come on to the allotments and later in the agenda.
Chair, through you again, and I appreciate that, Karen. I did see, I think it was last week, the appointment of the contractor was announced, and that's great. They see. Hopefully today we'll see the allotments being sorted and that getting the go ahead. But as you'll be aware, Karen, there are more issues in Ballinagard than just those particular 2. If you look at I suppose the legal side of it, land being used unauthorised by council and all of that. Whilst I appreciate the update on the park, and today we'll see the allotments, what about the rest of it? You know, what about the land that people are just imposing themselves on? What about the issues that we were having with the previous developer? Where are they all at, as opposed to going forward and trying to put this the entirety of this debate? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, members, as you're all aware, these are legal matters that are being taken forward by the City Solicitor. I did speak to the City Solicitor following on from the last committee, and he did advise that there was final negotiations being undertaken in terms of that, and he intends to bring an update report into members as soon as he possibly can in terms of that. So I'll engage with him again following today and see. He had hoped that would be able to come in this month, but I haven't spoken to him since in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully we will have an update report for members finalising all of that in the coming weeks.
Just in regards to ER 22624, and thanks that the brown bins are continuing to roll out and they've got a wee bit further. So say much appreciated, and hopefully as stated there, we get the last of them out January 25, still the target. So just appreciate that there's a few more of them out. Anyone else with matters arising? Are we content? Content, members? Move on then to item 8, which is street naming and property numbering, and that is Connor.
Thanks, Chair. To seek members' approval to regard to naming of a development at the rear Pizza View Glenshane Road and at Edmonton Square, Derry. Councillor received an application in respect of street name.
Proposed.
Good. Seconded. Yeah, proposed. Councillor Cleaney, seconded by Caitlin. We're content, members. Declare that item passed. Move on to the next items, which are open for information. I will run through them. If you wish to highlight or pass comment, notify me. First item is number 9 is the adverse weather wind arrangements for parks and green infrastructure. Councillor Riley wishes to comment.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for bringing me in, and thanks to officers for the pages that are there. I don't have an issue with what's on in the paper. I suppose it's just to just discuss the preparation for our own buildings as well. I know this is parks and green infrastructure, but we have other council structures that in the past have sustained damage during high winds, and the difficulties that causes for nearby residents. I'm thinking of Lisnagelton Leisure Centre, which was damaged by wind a couple of winters ago. So are we, as part of this paper, Chair, just asking our building and maintenance team, making sure that those properties are well secured ahead of the winter season, and that leads me to a wider conversation around the council district of properties that are have been left vacant by private landowners for some time that are also in a bad state of disrepair. How frequently, how active are our officer team in relation to notifying the owners of such buildings of their requirements to make sure that those buildings are safe in high wind, where we have roofs exposed, tiles can come off and cause serious damage to people. So I appreciate that's not something that the council has responsibility for in terms of carrying out those repairs directly, but are we able to use our social media channels and other places to alert owners of such buildings of the requirement to make sure that those buildings are safe in high wind? Thanks, Chair.
Yep, through you, Chair. Members, in terms of council's buildings, members are aware we have robust asset management systems in place and premises managers for every single one of our premises, and they do consider winter preparedness for all of our own buildings and assets. In terms of the second issue, in terms of privately owned businesses, that would fall under mainly our dangerous structures legislation. So individual issues, we don't proactively drive around the whole district looking for properties. We wouldn't have the resources to do that. But if members are aware of any properties at all, please make us aware, and the team will visit and assess the condition and take any appropriate action they can under that legislation, or indeed through environmental health in terms of dilapidation, if not dangerous structures. So we're happy to follow that up if members have any particular queries.
I have 2 more speakers. I have Alderman Middleton and then Councillor Murphy. So, Julie.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Just a brief comment. Thanks to officers for the report. The DUP certainly welcome the report. It's great to see some proactive work being undertaken around the updated risk assessment. I just wanted to maybe ask, or for it to be noted, that as part of the process, aside from social media updates, it would be really great if when things are being actioned, that councillors are given timely updates as well. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. It's just on a related issue. Recently, it's around resilience plans and local resilience plans, and recently, I'm just conscious we're getting into the winter, so recently there was an issue in Carnhill where emergency services had difficulty getting in contact with people to find out if there was someone somewhere for them to go, basically, when they were evacuated from their homes. And I'm just, do the resilience plans need updated? Yeah, and is there a possibility that could be done before the onset of the winter?
Yeah, through you, Chair, that department, the resilience officer sits within Denise McDonald's section. We will engage with Denise and ask her to contact you, particularly in relation to that one. But certainly I do know that they do consider all of the various community resilience plans on a regular basis, but we can ask them to contact you, and particularly in relation to that one. Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. Move on to item 10, the mobile update from Dara. Councillor Tierney.
Chair, thank you. I suppose I've got two issues with this particular agenda item. Number one, and I think I mentioned this last month, my disappointment that my boy wasn't included within the draft programme for government. I wonder, Chair, through you, since then, there has been conversations within Council about Council making a response to the draft programme for government. I assume, Karen, that you have thought about a response around my boy, and could you give us a bit of an update on that? But on the actual paper then as well, at 3.1 it says officers have requested an update from DAERA officials in respect of the progress of the remediation of the site. This is attached at Appendix 1. Karen, in your view, is Appendix 1 substantial update on the remediation of the site? Because I've read through it. It gives you a site update. It talks about meetings and stakeholder events and the joint project with this council, the criminal trial and sentencing. It doesn't really mention anything about the remediation of the site. And if you look back, and I want to reference this again, 3.1, we have asked for an update on the remediation of the site, and what they have sent us is, in my view, doesn't talk about it. I wonder what officers' view is on that, and if we can go back to them and ask for a specific update on the remediation of the site, not about whatever they're doing around the site or the meetings that they're having about the site, about the remediation side of it, because in my view, Chair, they've ignored what we have asked for in this report. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, members, firstly, yes, we have engaged. Rachel is pulling together the wider response to the draft programme for government, which we hope to bring to members this month. And certainly we have fed members' comments and specifically on this matter in relation to that. So you'll be able to see that reflected in that wider paper. In terms of the comments regarding the remediation of the site, members, you will be aware we've had a number of discussions in relation to the department's forthcoming, and we hope very soon, release of their preferred remediation strategy for the site. And indeed, members, you will also be aware that Council have procured an expert in order to actually consider that on behalf of Council and to provide us with specific advice in relation to the preferred remediation strategy that the department actually comes forward with. Again, that really is as much information as we have in terms of what the department are planning. They have, as you members know, through their stakeholder and community stakeholder meetings and meetings with members, have given information about the remediation process to date. I suppose the process of actually undertaking all of the site investigation, etc., and all of that information. However, at the stage that we're at now, we're awaiting their options remediations or their optimal remediation strategy, which we have been advised will be forthcoming as soon as possible. And we will await, and as I said, have appointed a contractor in order to work with us. So certainly, you know, the team have come under members on a number of occasions, and I am happy to invite them back, and again at an appropriate time, in order to address members in addition to the various stakeholder engagements that they undertake. So happy to.
Thank you for that, Karen. And whilst I appreciate that we're waiting on them to publish their preferred option or preferred strategy around remediation, I don't think it's, you know, you could invite them in now, but all they're going to really tell us is what they've told us here, and that they're in the process of publishing that strategy. However, I do want to reiterate the point that in my view, they have ignored the question that this council have asked them, specifically around the remediation progress and what it is. Can we follow up with them ahead of this committee meeting next month around when a time frame of when they plan to publish their preferred remediation strategy, and then we might be able to see a wee bit of progress, but they're dragging their heels now, in my view, to be quite honest. Thank you.
I have two more speakers on item 10. That's Alderman Middleton and Councillor Harkin. So, Julie.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Karen, for some of that information you were just sharing just now. I do share some of Alderman Tierney's or Councillor Tierney's concerns around the lack of clarity on what's actually happening with the remediation. So I guess we wait with bated breath for a further update. I am deeply concerned. The fly tipping is continuing to be an issue on the site. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to expand too far on that, but I do think it is positive to hear that the drinking water remains safe. I'm just wondering, as a council, you know, how can we further get the word out about the drinking water being safe, because people shouldn't have to, you know, be actively checking with NI Water or whatever every few days to check if their water's safe. You know, is there any such way that we can let the residents have that peace of mind? I'm just asking. I don't know if that's plausible or not. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, through you, Chair. Members, in terms of drinking water, I do know that the testing and results schedules, etc., in terms of the drinking water is updated on a regular basis and published on the website that DAERA use. However, we can potentially contact both the department and Northern Ireland Water in order to consider what additional information that they can release to the public, and again then our social media teams could tweet that and follow up to provide as much information as we can to residents in relation to that. So members, we can take that as an action from members today and discuss that with the department and Northern Ireland Water.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Karen, for that. And just to be mindful as well, that's a very good update and I appreciate that, but not all residents will be going online to seek information, especially some of our elderly residents, but I definitely see it as a positive update anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. And look, I think that there was a lot of frustration at the delay again at the sentencing in terms of the criminal trial, because that, I think, pushes back action on this. And I'm sure officers will know and colleagues in the chamber will know that there's been disengagement as well from the stakeholder group because of the lack of clarity around what exactly is being proposed for remediation. People have essentially said that they don't want to go to the meetings until there's going to be more clarity. And I think that that's people feel like they're being strung along. So I completely agree. I think for the programme for government, it was shocking that my boy wasn't included. And my boy really just as the worst example of illegal and toxic mines or landfills right across the north. This has to be urgently addressed. And I do think the council needs to be proactively getting that included. And we should encourage people, the campaigners, to engage with the programme for government consultation. But this raises a couple of things. One, look, in terms of water quality, I know that NI Water and DAERA are going to go to great lengths to tell us that the water is safe. But we've had a response from the Minister, O'Dowd, in regard to questions we've asked about the sewage going into the River Foyle between the two bridges. And they're basically saying that there is no way of knowing still, because NI Water doesn't actually properly monitor the amount of sewage going into the river. So that just raises more questions, because they don't actually even know sewage is going into our water system. So this is about my boy in terms of the seeping of whatever's toxic in the landfill going into our riverways, but it's also about the sewage as well. So there's a lack of confidence in how our in the government side of keeping our water safe, and I think that is not going to disappear. With this council discussion. The second one is in terms of the buoy and in terms of water quality. This is another reason why I think as a council as well, we have to insist that a programme for government includes an independent environmental protection agency. And this is something our council has voted in favour again and again. I think it was actually unanimous in the chamber. And the reason why that's important is because no minister or no department can be trusted to actually ensure that our environment is protected. So I think along with making sure Maboy is included and the plan to clean it up, we also have to insist on a independent environmental protection agency that will hold a minister, a department, NI Water to account. And with all these issues circulating about or being discussed in terms of water quality, that's going to be absolutely essential. So I think that's something we're going to have to work on as a council going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Harkin. Moving on, members, to item 11, is the flooding update. Does anyone wish to pass comment? Are we content? Move on then to item 12, which is the TransLink Tree Management Project. Does anyone wish to pass comment? No. Item 13 is the building control applications. Last comment. Members, can I get a proposer to go into consultation proposed by Councillor McGinley, seconded by Councillor Hart? And what do we see?